Welcome to the Masters of Brand Measurement, where Upwave, the brand outcomes measurement platform, brings together thought leaders from across the industry to talk trending topics in ad tech and media. We have an exciting panel for you. Enjoy the discussion.
All right, good afternoon and welcome to everyone joining us here today. It's great to have everybody joining us this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are dialing in from around the world. And welcome to Upwave's Masters of Brand Measurement, AI and Media, What's Real and What's BS. My name's Travis Lusk, and I work at a media advisory and analytics firm called Ubiquity, where I lead our AI practice focused on effective and responsible advertising. Today, I'm joined by an esteemed group of panelists, starting with Franz, who's the president and co-founder of a company called Swivel, George, who's the chief technology officer of our hosts over at Upwave, John, the CEO and co-founder of Newton Research, and it is two for the price of one Travis Day. We have Travis, the EVP of Advanced Advertising from Paramount, the new crown jewel of Paramount Skydance Corporation. Before we begin and get into today's questions in the session, we are going to have a Q&A at the end. So please find that Q&A button somewhere on your screen and start firing those questions in as we go, and we'll come to them a bit later on. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank Chris Kelly for inviting me to moderate today and give a shout out to the true all-stars of getting this session off the ground, Jess and Emily from the Upwave team, who did 100% of the work getting this session off the ground today. And we thank them for their hard work. So with that in mind, I'm going to dive right into our first set of questions and get going. This is hopefully going to be an extremely sort of frank and direct conversation, a little bit of nerdy tech stuff, as well as some practical tips and suggestions for how to move your sort of AI journey forward, either as an individual contributor in your organization or as a leader in whichever organization you work for. So the first question today, we're going to dial up our sort of BS detectors, set them on high, and begin with sort of product marketing theater. And talk a little bit about what we think is perhaps, I don't know, I don't want to use the word vaporware, but maybe a little bit out there in terms of what we're seeing today in the landscape and what's not. So the first question is, what's the most ridiculous AI claim that you've heard pitched so far with a straight face, I don't know, perhaps in the last year? Let's go to Franz. You're nodding your head, so you get the first go at this question.
Sounds amazing. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for letting us join this panel. Listen, the thing that I hear a lot is that AI is, quote unquote, taking over.
Mhm.
And there's this old adage in our industry, in particular in all industries, of garbage in and garbage out, right? So if the data in to some of the sort of new world of generative AI and machine learning and all the other sort of agentic use cases as well, if the data you feed it isn't of good quality, or it's sparse, or your strategy of what the actual outcomes that you're trying to achieve, you're only going to get to an inefficient or a bad outcome, in and around kind of using AI to improve your media business broadly defined.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Franz just said. Um, I have a slightly different take on it. I've seen a lot of entrenched, software providers in our space announcing that they're now AI companies, and that can be somewhat comical. Slapping a conversational interface potentially on a place where perhaps a conversational interface shouldn't go, doesn't make you an AI company, and there's a whole heck of a lot of that going on right now.
Yeah, it's certainly the thing that is the sort of rocket fuel on valuations and things like that everybody feels like they need to be talking about it. And with wildly different sort of motivations depending on what part of the ecosystem you're coming from. Certainly all the major agencies have it in every component of what they talk about lately. And so kind of dovetailing into that, when a vendor shows up claiming that their AI will revolutionize basically everything that they could possibly offer you, what's sort of the quickest tell that they're sort of full of it? Like what's a red flag or something that you sort of mentally check as they're sort of going through their pitch that says, this is probably not what they're making it out to be?
My instinct is that Travis might have the best perspective on this one.
Yeah. So I can jump in on
Yeah.
this. I think one of the sort of initial red flags, and I think it's piggybacking on something that John brought up, is when folks are starting to slap agentic AI on things that don't actually need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden they're like, you have this conversational interface to do something, to do what, right? And it's like, well, what's the task? forecasting ad delivery. Okay, but maybe we don't need to ask something to do that. We can just do it.
Don't we have a report for that?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, I think that a lot of this comes in, and the repackaging, I think, of folks, they all want to lead with the AI pitch because it's the sort of the new hotness right now. But the irony is not new, right? Like we've been doing machine learning for over a decade. Most of the
Right.
Paramount business
Yeah.
is built on top of it, right? Like all these companies have data scientists, like these algorithms exist, and it's very often the case. You come in, you know, you talk to a company that's insert company name .ai, right?
Sure.
And within 15 minutes, you realize they're not talking about generative AI. They're talking about machine learning, and they're pitching something that's existed in the space for a decade, and something we might already have. So I think that, like, honestly, you got to kind of move past the sheen of the concept of generative AI and really understand like what the use cases are. Um, you know, I think it's similar to like quantum computing when people talk about that and they're like, this is going to revolutionize computing. And it's like, well, yeah, but in some areas, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the one size tool fits all. And I think that's the same thing with AI. And the folks that portray it like it's the kind of cure-all tonic, like some 1880s, you know, traveling salesman, like it's easy. It's easy to see.
George,
Yeah.
did you already register upwave.ai? Did you already snag that domain?
We may or may not own that domain.
We may or may not have swivel.ai. The thing I notice a lot, and here's where like verticalization, if that's a word, matters a lot. Like even Travis, your yield case, for example, we make a lot of effort to work on sort of tools to make yield management more effective here at Swivel and for various publishers and ad operations type folks. And if you sort of encounter a vendor that is more generic, and of course, like we're going to get to sort of investments and the world of venture capital investing in valuations to your point, Travis, but if the team at the company or the company isn't, vertically focused or focused on a specific set of use cases out of the gate, that raises a huge red flag. For example, we've been in the business of advertising and yield management and ad operations for 20 plus years, certainly in my case, and the rest of the team here at Swivel, and we're very focused on a particular set of problems. But to see a more generically focused software company, which is sort of pitching a very AI forward kind of narrative of the value they can create, but you're trying to solve an infinitely complicated challenge of yield management and forecasting. I actually love that example, as you know, Travis. That again to me is like a big red flag. If you don't know kind of the specifics of what you're trying to talk about in a particular industry, my spidey sense goes up big time.
So totally agree with what you just said, Franz. There was actually an MIT study that was just published just a couple days ago, which cited that 95% of AI initiatives are failing. They are pilots. It's important to read past the headline because once you get past the headline, what Franz said is very true. If you work with a specialized vertical vendor that's focused on a specific task, you're much, much more likely to be successful. If you're trying to accomplish something with a generic, chatbot, good luck. If you've got some internal team that's been assigned with build something with AI, good luck. Actually working with people who are focused on that and think about it every day and are experts in that area and they're applying AI to the problem greatly increases your chance of having a successful implementation of AI.
And going back to the ML thing at the beginning, I don't know if you guys experienced the same thing when AI really started becoming part of the conversation. All of us that have been in the digital ad tech and digital ad ecosystem since forever, since the early aughts, we had ML forever, right? Or at least it feels like, right? Like true hardcore capital M, capital L, ML stuff going on. So like for me anyway, the first few meetings that I was in where AI was brought up as a topic, I was kind of like looking around like, oh, we're just calling this AI now? Okay, got it. Like understood. At least that was my experience there. So kind of on that note then too, so it's a little bit of a thought experiment. So if every AI system just magically vanished tomorrow, what parts of our industry do you think would actually notice? Or would it actually not really have an impact? And I'll kind of start. I think I think it would sort of have maybe a minimal-ish impact with a couple of exceptions. I think there are pockets of campaign-specific optimization that
Yeah.
might all of a sudden stutter a bit. And it's largely because I think we've lost a lot of the talent in being able to do manual optimization, which I think we'll talk about in more depth in a little while. But that's the only one that sort of came to mind for me.
Yeah, I personally think it's a little bit of a false choice. Like, I don't think anything's just going to come crashing down immediately
Yeah.
because some AI solution isn't there. But to your point, and I had the same thought here, Travis Lusk. That there's definitely missed opportunities to create. Again, defining your sort of metrics for success in some of these AI-centric projects and what partners you might work with is really critical. And it doesn't matter if you're on the buy side, the sell side, or somewhere in the middle, like where we are. The sort of key metric that we think a lot about in terms of like automating various media operations and advertising operations. That's what we're focused on. To date this month, we've done almost 7 million automated ad operations or yield management actions across our 15 or so clients. To turn that off immediately would have a significant impact.
Sure.
But like overall, which parts of your business are just going to like crash overnight with the absence of some of this stuff I think is a bit of a stretch today. I mean, in the future, it could become more severe. But for now, we're still figuring this out. We're still growing it. But it's not an all or nothing, I think, result here.
I think it's interesting because if it all just disappeared tomorrow, I don't think really anything kind of collapses, because if it disappears for everybody, we're all just going to go back to doing what we did before it existed, right? Like if you look at AI as a facilitator of things like innovation, to the point around yield management, you can have a lot more finesse. You can do things at a larger scale. We used to do things by hand, right? Maybe it was to a lesser degree, and we didn't squeeze as much juice out of the fruit. But I think a lot of the investment right now in AI, it feels like a little bit of like a Cold War, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to fall behind your competitors. Everybody's talking about it. And you want to make sure that like when this thing becomes the linchpin that's going to drive growth, you're the one that's standing first in line, right? So like for it to completely blank out, like everybody would have to adjust. I think you'd see like, a lot of reorging, restructuring, different types of talent being sort of prioritized. But like, I don't think it's like the world's going to come to an end.
I think there's a
George.
few, yeah, there's a few areas that I can see, on the machine learning side. I think that's definitely deeply baked into a few areas, particularly in measurement and targeting.
Yeah.
And targeting sort of the entire operation of figuring out which ad is going to have the highest resonance with which person is deeply built on top of machine learning and sort of recommendation system ideas and all kinds of data aggregation and matching. And then on the measurement side, probably your mileage varies between different types of measurement and different vendors, but at Upwave, we make heavy use of machine learning in our causal inference pipelines, which are necessary for understanding the actual incremental impact of ads. It's sort of easy to do a naive type of measurement where you just look at who saw an ad and look at who is aware of a brand. But if you're not really thoughtful about making sure the ads weren't just targeted to people who already had high awareness, then you can get very misleading results. And then if you feed those results into optimization, then you make bad decisions that don't actually lead to good results for the business. So machine learning is, we train thousands of models every night for all the campaigns that we do, and it's critical to accurate measurement. But then on the generative AI side, it's definitely more of a nascent area, but there are real valuable applications. Like at Upwave, we use it heavily for reporting to create campaign insights reports that are entirely created using generative AI that save a lot of time for our customers who just want to understand the key story of what's happening on a campaign. And we also increasingly use it sort of under the hood in various workflows on things like customer support and questionnaire auditing to make sure that we're actually asking the right questions to the right people. And then even just in software development, it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing that accelerates software teams. And these things are all, we're not getting 10x productivity, but even if you get a 30% productivity increase on key parts of your workflow and your teams, that's that much more money that you can spend on research and development, on building new things and building new tools that are useful in all different domains of media.
I just think it's like to the ML point, ML is so deeply ingrained in this industry, of
Sure.
course. Right? But like I remember ripping elastic net regressions and lasso regressions out of all platforms to put ML in there to begin with. And it wasn't that long ago we did that. And I remember ripping a bunch of like OLS regressions out to put those in. And I remember ripping a bunch of rolling 4-week averages out to put those in. Like that's, I think, the Cold War aspect of this is you're right. I think it's more efficient, more productive. But like compared to your competitive set, you have to keep up. But these are tools, right? These are not replacements.
There's also,
Absolutely.
I think, two sides of this coin are sort of like in front of the curtain and behind the curtain. So the out front stuff being the AI-driven tools that companies are using as a sort of a feature or a product that they're selling to a customer or to a client. And then the behind the curtain stuff is all of the internal sort of AI or ML based tools that the company's using just to basically operate and do their stuff. And I don't know for the panelists to what extent you're willing or sort of able to disclose this sort of thing, but in terms of like the ratio of which your company has AI specific features and goodness that you're selling to a customer versus how much you're just using it internally to be able to get stuff done at the end of the day. I'd say at Ubiquity, I think we were a little bit later to diving into the hardcore AI game than perhaps others in the space, but at the moment we're mostly using it for internal stuff. And with new use cases that we're coming up with sort of every day. Every team member at Ubiquity has our internal chatbot, and we're enabling it to do more and more stuff from us. And like just as a broad use case, one of the super helpful, it's silly, but one of the sort of super helpful things is because we're a big global distributed organization with 700 or 800 employees worldwide. We have case studies all over the world that just like don't live in one easy place that's able to sort of stitch them all together unless you're going to sit there and open 97 PowerPoint decks. And then take the time to translate the ones that are in French over to English and stuff like that. So like these little use cases are super powerful internally for us. I think it benefits our clients downstream because things can get out the door quicker and better and sort of be more rich. But largely it's internal. How about you guys?
For us,
So,
go
oh,
ahead, John.
I was gonna say,
Go
so
ahead.
we build AI agents that our customers use, agencies, brands, publishers. In order to build those tools, we leverage humans and we leverage AI tools. So we just raised a bunch of money, and it was to hire a lot more people. AI isn't, building itself. This isn't like some magical recursive thing that's been invented. People aren't needed anymore. People are definitely needed. The AI is tools to help people do things faster, quicker, or better. So yeah, we're a company that tries to give humans superpowers. And when there are tools that we can use internally that help us get stuff done more quickly, we absolutely use them. I think if you're in the software development space and your team's not using AI in some way, I'd be shocked. It could be that they're using it secretly, but it is very prevalent with software developers.
Yeah, we see the same thing. Obviously, there's sort of native aspects like ML and some generative AI aspects to the product that we offer our customers at the end of the day. But internally, we use all kinds of tools, and it's kind of eat your own dog food, and it almost doesn't matter what function you're in. To John's point, we have engineers that use tools like a Claude, for example. We've trained, I kind of lead most of our go-to-market efforts. We've customized ChatGPTs based on all kinds of our proprietary data. It could be case studies and sales decks and investor decks. And we use that sort of custom trained AI for our own internal marketing purposes, sales purposes. Our client success team, which spends tons of time trying to help improve our customers' businesses. They're using AI tools to scan our whole Google Drive library to make it easier to search. There's a ton of examples, not just meeting notes and things like Fireflies and which is very good, by the way. I find that's also a very useful productivity tool on top of the stuff that we're building kind of natively for our customers for our own product.
That's awesome. I think, yeah, it's an interesting thing as well to sort of think about those tools that they're using to make the tools. Like that's always something.
Yeah.
You just mentioned it. You guys just mentioned it. And I was thinking I do that all the time. So one of the sort of positions. One of the things that we do at Ubiquity too is we sit in the room with a lot of media investment pros and CMOs and stuff like that when they're evaluating other tech, and help them sort of tease things apart and make decisions. And those are the questions. I feel like I'm the salesperson's sort of worst nightmare, because those are the questions that I'm asking them. Is like, I know you want to talk about your AI feature. I want to talk about the tools that you use to make the AI feature. And if I'm getting good answers there, like in terms of the sophistication they used, or to John's point, like, oh, well, we actually have the chops, we have the people here that know how to do this, like, and they get into a lot of those conversations, it makes me believe that their proper AI thing that they're trying to sell is more legit without even having tested it yet. It's just like, okay. But if it's on the other end, if it's like they're tripping over that, they can't describe how they made it, they can't describe like how they realized they needed to build a product team and they brought in an expert from the industry and then they built a team around that to actually build the thing, then it's like, okay, well, you just dreamt this up 4 weeks ago and put it in a deck.
Yeah, I actually think the internal versus external designation may not be the right lens, right?
Okay.
So much of that's kind of stuff crosses the line, right? Like you think about like campaign management, it's like, well,
Mhm.
that's an internal process, but your clients get mad at you if it doesn't go well, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it all is kind of blurry. I actually think
Yeah.
a better lens, and I think you hear this a lot when you talk to folks about applications in AI, senior folks that are trying to figure out the right way to apply it to their organization. There's generally like it's almost like everybody's on a spectrum, and on one side there's the I can cut cost out of my business by implementing this, right? I can shave workforce, I can do all of this.
Hmm.
I think that that's a very internal focused thing. And on the other hand, you have, well, if everybody's more productive, we can sell more of the things that we sell and we can build new things and we can drive the business forward, right?
Hmm.
And I feel like most people are on a spectrum of like somewhere, in between those 2 points, and a lot of that stuff is being explored. But like personally, I think that the right approach is more around how can you use this to turbocharge your team, right? I'm fully on board with John. It's like, look, this is all about making your folks more efficient. Um, you know, Cutting costs to chase quarterly earnings is an understandable thing. But it's got to be the most short-sighted way to approach AI, I think, for the long run for any of our businesses. We were just talking, funny enough, earlier today about this article where Amazon's cloud chief talked about how, I think he referenced, he's like, look, if you replace all of your junior employees in 10 years, you don't have anybody else that knows how to do anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really true thing, right? And I think the folks that are hyper focused on cost cutting are going to run into a zone where a couple years down the road you have a weird talent desert, and the folks that are using it to supercharge their workforces are not going to have that problem.
Are you seeing that that today, that sort of talent desert starting to be created?
I mean, I think
Probably depends on
not
the
today
sector.
because it's
Yeah.
still very new, it's still very nascent, right? But
Yeah.
there was a different MIT study, I think, than the one that John referenced, that showed there's a significant correlation in ability or loss of ability to think critically
Sure.
the more you use AI in like school, right? And of course, because critical thinking, if you're using AI to replace that as a muscle, will atrophy. And I think that's really what I'm trying to say is like, look, like,
Yeah.
how do you continue? You have to think about talent on long-term horizons, right? How do you keep the pipeline thick? Because at the end of the day, in 5 years, you want somebody that knows how optimization conceptually works. Because I don't know, if a sun flare goes off and we do lose all AI, that guy becomes the most valuable person in advertising.
Yeah. Yeah. Get him out of the basement. He's the only one who knows how to turn the coffee maker on and optimize these campaigns. So I think we can look at parallels to in other very, very related parts of the sector as well. So for example, I would say, without naming specific names, the big walled gardens have done a masterful job at getting the larger agencies sort of oriented around the sort of what I call sort of the easy button of just load all the assets up there, tell us what you want the outcome to be, and hit the button, and it'll just go. Like, you don't have to really think much more beyond that, and the system will take care of most of the work. It's an over exaggeration, but that's more or less sort of the pitch when you sort of boil it all down. Originally, I thought that would not go anywhere. Like, clearly, everybody will know that we can't go that hard into the paint on it. But then when you step back and actually look at it, it has done exactly that. Like the level of sort of talent that we see within various trading organizations that can like tease apart sort of bid logs and understand like why something went slightly awry, or like triage why, an ad tag isn't firing on a page right, or just like all these little goofy things that we have had to deal with for the last couple decades. Like the level of people that can do that today was already starting to diminish before AI really started hitting the upper part of the hockey stick. And I think it's gonna go and then pop, because there's going to be some sort of event that all of a sudden highlights this, and we're going to be scrambling to get that talent back.
Yeah, I mean, our experience here is very relevant to exactly what you guys are talking about. Swooville's still a pretty young company. We're approaching our 2-year mark in a couple of years. We work primarily today with, very large media companies. The last thing that they want, and let's talk about yield optimization, for better or worse, I'm going to stick to that. When you sort of propose something, I'm not saying that we've done this, but like if you propose something that's like, oh, I've got some autonomous yield bot that is gonna, solve all your yield management needs, that's generically applicable to multiple different kinds of media companies, no one's gonna buy that. That's just the reality. The reality that we found is that smart clients, senior folks, who run these operational functions, know what it is they want to do. They know how they want to improve it, automate it, using whatever tools available, be it a machine learning based tool or something more generative, or sort of more Gen AI, or ideally the combination of both, which is what we see. But the starting point is these companies know what they want to do. They just don't have the time to do it. So you give them the tools to make not just a couple hundred changes a day, but tens of thousands of changes per day to improve, to optimize their business, be it buy or sell side. That's a very different sort of human first approach. And a lot of larger enterprise organizations are very wary, and they should be, of something that, is being promised as, well, insert this thing here and it's going to kind of solve all your yield problems. Everyone's businesses are pretty nuanced. And so we've taken that very kind of like human, almost rules-based system first, and then augment the human's ability to kind of come up with new ideas. Or, hey, we've got an agent that's optimizing price floors, for example. Okay, well, humans know what kind of rules they would want to set at different times of the day, for example, even when people aren't, working 24/7, because unfortunately none of us can do that. But there's a way to augment that behavior kind of after the fact, and those are the kinds of products that, we're trying to bring to market.
It's funny you say that too, Franz, because I was just talking to a friend who's in the business, works in the sort of one of the big local television owners, and has been testing a lot of sort of pseudo AI driven yield optimization systems and things like that. And his number one criticism of them all was they all sound great at the beginning, but
Right.
then when you start having to put on your 97th manual rule to correct it back to do what you want, because you have so many, because you've got 100 different stations around the country and each one with its different business rules and all this kind of stuff, like it becomes more work to manage all the rules that the AI has to follow than just doing it the old-fashioned way.
Right. And that's where sort of augmenting human, the sort of the human starting point, right, with recommendations, right? Hey, we noticed you have a rule set that's doing this and this and this, but you may not have noticed that, hey, there's a portion of your inventory or this campaign that is, not being touched, let's say, by this kind of like rule-based automation. Do you want to extend an existing automation? Do you want to create a new one, or do you want to decline this recommendation? Right. And I think that approach is like super, really critical.
Awesome.
I would say too that like I think people have to realize there's a risk too that AI can make you more inefficient, not more efficient. Right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And I think that all of these things are coupled together because, if you automate a workflow that shouldn't exist, you just automated something that shouldn't exist, right? Like that's the definition of inefficient. It's like, congrats, now we can do this thing we shouldn't be doing, right? And those types of decisions that seem silly, but like I think you can see that stuff play out across the industry. You've been seeing it for years where people kind of continue to lean into something because they know that I have to do this. This rule has to exist like this, but somewhere along the line, somebody forgot why. So we just keep doing it. And if you're implementing AI and nobody's asking the question of like, well, is this instead of just making our existing approach better, could we do something different here? then you end up over reliant and you build a very automated. It's like playing the Incredible Machine. That game.
There's so much of that, right? It's like, are we trying to make the incredibly painful thing easier to live with instead of just solving why it's incredibly painful in the first place?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, you treat the symptom, not the disease, and
Yeah.
it's easy when you have
Yeah.
a cure-all balm.
All right, let's shift gears and we'll come to George first on this one. So, what sort of AI tools or feature or function have you seen lately that legitimately like blew your hair back? And that's because you have the best hair of anyone on the call. So which one was like, wow, this is gonna like actually change things going forward?
I think that's an easy answer for me, and it's Claude Code, which
Okay.
the Claude models have been around for quite a while, but Claude Code is a relatively new product. I think it came out sometime early this year, and it really hit its stride when the Claude 4 series models were released. But it is a totally different experience of using AI to assist with coding and software development. In the past, you would open up ChatGPT and type in a question, and it would write a little snippet of code, and you would copy paste that into your code editor and sort of do that piece by piece. And it was helpful when you had a specific question or like a particular thing that was tricky to write. With Claude Code, you open your terminal and you say, build me a mobile application that lets people look up the weather, or change my website so that it embeds a calendar in this page that people can click on to book something. And it just starts writing the code for you. It creates files, it puts code in the files. It can actually run the files themselves. It can run tests. It can see what's working. It can open a browser and click around and see if the calendar actually shows up and is clickable. And it still does a lot of things wrong, but it does enough things right, and it does them quickly enough that if you have an actual thoughtful and experienced engineer using it, it is an incredible accelerant. It, for me personally, it's actually been transformative because, I came up from a software engineering background, but as CTO, I have so many responsibilities that getting the focus time to actually sit down and write software has been really hard for the last few years. But with Claude Code, I can just open the terminal and tell it what I want if I have an idea for a new prototype, and it just starts working. And I go to 3 hours of meetings, then come back, and it's put together a first version of something. I can say, that color's wrong there, or this algorithm's inefficient, this, you use the wrong tool here. And then it just goes and changes those things. And I come back 2 hours later and I've got an actual working first version of something. And just like that ability to translate thought into an actual working artifact is super empowering for me. And Claude Code makes it possible. It's been
That's like the exact use case that came to my mind as well. I'm an amateur at best, sort of coder, and we haven't pushed anything into production using it end to end yet. But that prototyping stuff of being able to build it, and I've some of our engineers I've sort of impressed as well, because I don't just go with like the feature request, like can we do this or can we change it to that? Like I can build out a functional wireframe in an hour and say like, this is kind of what I meant, and hand it off to somebody that actually knows how to build it. And they're like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I know what you're trying to do now. Like that has been awesome. John?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would plus one on that as well. Certainly on Claude Code, I'm not an engineer by trade, by any stretch of the imagination, but I can see what it's doing with our engineering teams, and outside of the stuff that we're building, from that really kind of blows us away, like how effective that can be. So, and John, I might have overlapped you, so I'll flip it
oh,
back
it's
to you.
okay. I was going to take it in a different direction. The the thing that I've seen recently that blew my mind was the new Gemini VO3,
Yeah.
the Kalshi ad that ran during the NBA Finals. For folks dialed in who haven't seen this, don't do it now, but after this webinar, Google that and look at the 30-second spot that was produced using generative AI, and specifically the VO3 from Google. It costs $2,000 in prompt cost, 95% cheaper than traditional production costs. A human was in control. A human's creativity and expertise was 100% needed in order to create the end product. I think he did 300 to 400 different prompts or something like that in order to actually get everything the way he wanted it to be. He had a script that he wrote in partnership with like ChatGPT and I think with Gemini. And the spot is really amazing. And I think that's like an eye opener for our industry, is just seeing what you can do when you put tools like this into a very talented and creative person's hands.
Yeah. This is just an aside, but people who aren't ever in creative or video production and stuff like that, like I hear all the time, people are like, oh, but it only makes stuff that is 8 seconds long, and I sort of have to explain to them, it's like go watch any commercial, any TV show, anything where more than 5 seconds was on screen at a time,
Yeah.
and they don't realize that it's actually like stitched together 2 and 3 second things over and over and over again that actually make a production, and that's just totally normal for anybody that's produced anything. When you sort of explain, they're like, oh, I get it. They're just wanting to be able to type in, and we're definitely going to get there, but like type in and have it make an hour-long production.
Yeah, I'm sure he used like CapCut to like stitch it all together.
Yeah.
Like VO3 just gave him like a library of things to use to then stitch together and
All
overlay
the assets.
on. Right, it gave him all the assets, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Travis.
I was actually going to agree with John. I think it's the video generation stuff. I remember the first time I saw an output from Sora, it was like, oh my God, like this is pretty bananas town.
Mhm.
And to the point around the length, I mean, like they're generating, you can see where it's going, right? 30 seconds is not too long of a spot for it to generate. I think, and look, everybody brings their own bias towards things. And my bias is I spent most of my career trying to figure out how to target better. And then when I think about like the ability to generate fully custom creative assets designed, by the hundred, designed to break down your targeting parameters to hundreds of micro targets where everything's perfectly married. Everyone's always talked about this is like, hey, great, but like outside of some applications and like digital and email where it's like pretty easy to generate, you can't, like the most creative shifting you're doing is like, well, make the car red, not blue, right?
Mhm.
The notion of you can build bespoke creative and have somebody, to John's point, like building a constant thread, right? A constant marketing strategy throughout it, but tailoring creative itself to the person that's going to see it. Combine that with addressability and improvements in concepts like identity that enables addressability to become more accurate. And like you've kind of got the recipe for perfect targetability.
Yeah,
And Travis, have you had anybody yet? Maybe it's early, but has any advertiser sort of showed up at the Paramount doorstep and said like, and great, here's my campaign, and here's 100 creative assets that I want you to go and execute yet? Or are you having those conversations? You must be at least having those conversations, I'd imagine.
So look, the number's not 100,
But a lot.
but like, I think when like linear addressable started to become a thing, people started to realize the power of this. And a lot of times it comes from advertisers that have a lot of brands, and they're like, hey, like target this creative for this brand to this kind of person, or like,
Or change the end card for the auto ads, right?
Right, like insurance is a great example, right? Like, do
Yeah.
they own a motorcycle? Show them the motorcycle ad. Do they own a
Yeah.
boat? Show them the boat one, right? And then we have 5 creatives for each one of those products.
Yep.
I don't think we haven't seen the world where somebody's come and they're like, I have 200 different ads for this single bar of soap, and here's the instruction for who I want you to pipe them to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the
Yep.
implications of this on the creative side, and I had noted this as well as we were just thinking through these questions, like in particular, like you've seen this trend in the television industry at least, which is like, okay, great, we work with these Fortune 500 brands, but whatever it is, 20 plus $billion of TV advertising is still local, right? And that
Mhm.
means tons of little campaigns and smaller regional and local advertisers were sort of the long pole in the tent of, well, can I even afford to buy the media? Then I have to go spend, 10, 15, whatever more $1,000 on a piece of creative, just one, right? And you've got Comcast and others and Universal Ads trying to democratize access to TV advertising, be it for streaming or linear. But certainly in streaming use cases, like it's very possible now for local advertisers to have, a really good quality, 30-second spot that can kind of support sort of better access for kind of the local regional side of the market, where before that was just not possible, I think, economically.
For me, one of the use cases too, just generally speaking, has been extremely talented people that are really talented at one thing, like a comedy writer, then being able to use these tools to expand it directly into the other thing. So like great comedy writer that can then create videos directly because they know they have the tools to just manufacture them. They didn't have any video editing skills or production skills before, but now they kind of do. In our business, one of the sort of parallels too, and we may have, I'm sure many of us have experienced this too. We all probably know like these genius like data science people that like, oh my God, they can just find the most fascinating little trends and nuggets of information in massive data sets, but they tend to be the worst storytellers. So it's like their work is fascinating. If only they could tell a story, but now they can. Like in so many different ways, they can prompt something to create the visualization, help me step through the story of how to make this thing sing. Those are the types of like nerdy applications that get me super excited too.
Yeah, it's a good point, but again, like I think it's all about tools versus
Yeah.
replacement because like to the
Yeah.
point around, hey, like you've never had video skills and now you do, you probably still don't, right? You still have a thing that allows you to do this. And like to your
Yeah.
earlier comment of like turn on the TV, it's all 5-second slices cut together. A lot of it is, but you don't get a Rashomon by Kurosawa by replicating what's been out there, right?
Exactly.
And that guy's a filmmaker.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna have a little bit of a curveball here and actually jump to one of the questions in the Q&A because I think it relates to this as well. Somebody asked, what AI capability have you all been expecting to see pitched by a vendor, but surprisingly it hasn't happened yet? There was sort of an interesting one related to the sort of timing of things that we think of awesome. What do you think should have arrived by now, but just kind of hasn't yet?
Don't know if I have one.
Yeah. We don't
See
get
a
pitched
lot of
by some of the
AI
vendors.
pitches.
So one for me, like I guess maybe it's not that revolutionary, but one of them that I thought would be here now, or at least it would be hearing maybe gearing up for next year was a lot more smaller, maybe 2 and 3 person agencies sort of coming out of the woodwork that now don't necessarily need to have a 25-person staff right out of the gate that could be super effective at doing very, very specific things, or maybe even presenting themselves as full end-to-end. Franz, your sort of comment on the sort of local individual car dealer that owns like 5 dealerships in town and stuff like that, like those types of shops that can service a very specific region where there hasn't been, an agency before, but somebody that used to work in New York now lives out in, a rural area and has a couple buddies that can put together a shop and sort of stand up all these skills that the big holding companies have had before. I think that's going to come. I thought it was going to be a little bit sooner, but that's one of the things I'm watching for.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on. So I think we've touched around the edges of this one a little bit so far, but for us as marketers or just us as sort of leaders in the space, is AI making us actually smarter, or is it just helping us make the same mistakes 10 times faster?
I mean, I have to say we see this with our clients too. Again, we're somewhat narrowly or vertically focused on kind of the business of how do we use these tools to improve the business of media operations, ad operations, yield management, whatever, campaign optimization. For the right person, this is back to talent, right? And it reminds me a little bit of like the early days of Freewheel, where I spent a good amount of time in my career from the very first days, where we kind of handed people this sort of very complicated new video ad serving tool. And like our clients didn't really know how to use it. It had so many more features than a traditional display or whatever kind of ad server. We found ourselves very quickly, consulting our clients to build them into powered users. And we have the same dynamic here at Swivel, where like we're trying to just change the mindset of operations and give people an entirely new way to think about, hey, how do I get the job done that I need to be done? But with the very real power of saying you can now have, teams of, customized agents that are doing your ad operations for you 24/7 and empowering the people to change how they think about doing their work and how they run their day and how they run their teams and frankly how they resource their teams and the kinds of talent that they need to again like just think differently about things. And we want to empower our clients and the senior operational leaders and yield leaders of these organizations to just think differently. And so like that's just a dynamic where we're trying to push, very, very, very aggressively to our clients. And like, again, you see some people leaning in and you see other people like, oh, this is, I've got some nervousness about this swivel company and what it means for me. But I think if you're open-minded and you're taking this kind of learned mindset, it will make a difference. Again, in our little niche of the world of trying to like improve the business of media operations.
Yeah, I have a very similar response. And our tools are really focused on helping with data science and like hardcore media analytics problems. And our our customer set, data scientists and analysts will use our tools. So it makes them more productive. And if you've ever worked with a data scientist, like one of the things they like doing the least is getting an ad hoc question or being asked why something happened and opening up a notebook, having to fiddle with it in order to get a response back to an executive because it takes them away from doing the more strategic work that they want to do, right? They want to work on the latest and the greatest. They want to work on building new models, opening up something that they've already solved for in order to answer, the seemingly endless ad hoc requests that they get just slows them down from doing the more strategic work that they want to do. And so we've built agents that can be chained together in workflows, so they can empower other folks on their team to handle those sorts of queries. Those sorts of questions become like the day-to-day if you're not careful with the really good data science team. You become addicted to them, and you want to constantly ask them questions and to look into things and ask follow-up questions to them. And you're taking them away to the work that they should be doing. So we try to solve for both. We try to make them more efficient, help them get stuff done more quickly, and then also take some of the more mundane stuff off of their plates so they can focus on the strategic.
I'm
Oh, right.
I'm not even sure failing faster is like the opposite of being smarter, right? Like I'm a big proponent of build fast, fail fast. That if being able to get to the wrong answer 10 times faster is not valuable, like that's a strategic issue.
Yeah, 100%. So let's shift now to the Q&A because we actually got a ton of great questions coming in the Q&A here. And I wanted to see how many we can get through in the time that we have left here. Let's go to the world famous Andrew Kraft has a question here. When focusing on internal tools as co-pilots, not as people replacements, did you guys build those in-house or bring in specialists to create agents and other tools? And why or why not did you do those things?
Hello, Andrew. Good question. Not unexpected from Mr. Kraft. Again, for our internal tools, we're using third party tools. Again, different parts of the organization, different kinds of tools are better at certain things. Cloud Code being sort of the best example. We've talked about that one, I think, already. But for the things that we're developing in-house, those for our customers to use, right? That stuff we're building. But a lot of the sort of various tools we use for the different functions of the company, for the most part, are generally available to all.
Yeah, I would say internal tool development, I think you always have to be careful with making that decision. Usually you want to use a vendor who focuses on making that tool, and they work with a lot of companies and they get a lot of feedback and they're experts at making that tool. Uh, I think it's related to a problem that I do see in the industry right now is there's a mad dash with consultants showing up at large companies saying, hey, let me build that for you. I could build that on top of Gemini or AWS or whomever. Or even big platforms showing up with a lot of freebies to get you to build stuff on top of their platforms. Beware.
Yeah.
The age-old problem of maybe if you're not a software company, maybe you shouldn't write software is still true in the age of AI. You have to focus on what your business is. Like my business is not about building co-pilots to help an AI startup. Like if I go down that road, I'm going to be putting people against a problem that's not where we generate revenue directly. And so we leverage, Claude, absolutely. Cursor, other tools like that, absolutely. We license them from those companies because they're experts at making those tools.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably a longer answer than anticipated, but I do think it's an important theme to remember.
All right, this next one is for George. because it's very technical. So this one's from Emily Evans. Claude Code generally uses long context windows, but developers are still reporting memory limitations over longer sessions. What are some practical constraints today and tips and tricks that should help teams sort of work around some of these current constraints? And I'm sure it won't be constraints too much longer, but what are some tips today?
Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating than when you're in a hot cloud code session and it suddenly compacts your entire conversation and forgets everything you've been talking about for the last hour and a half at just the wrong
Yeah.
time.
It's
So
always when
really,
you're starting to hit your stride too. It's like, well, we're right in the groove right now. Bang.
exactly. So you do have to be thoughtful about not flooding it with confusing extra stuff. And it's actually a little bit like managing a human that, if you give somebody a task and then you spend 45 minutes talking about irrelevant things and then 5 minutes talking about the one particular thing you want them to do, they're going to get confused. They're going to go off and do the wrong thing. So you just need to be very thoughtful and specific about giving Claude just the relevant information, everything that's relevant, but nothing that's not. And a very specific tactical thing is you can use the Claude sub-agent feature, which is relatively new because all the sub-agents get their own context window. So you can think about how to divide the work into, things like having a code review sub-agent, or I just today created a documentation librarian sub-agent that as I code, I can tell it go do this thing, review all the documentation on the project, make sure it's still all up to date. And that requires reading dozens or hundreds of pages of documentation that would flood my context window, but because it's partitioned into the subagent, it can do that thing off to the side while I keep my main context window clean for the main coding that I'm doing.
Awesome. Exactly the level of detail that I expected from you, George. All right, so here's sort of a fun one. Maybe we'll go to Travis with this one first. How many Super Bowl ads next year do you think will be made exclusively with Gen AI?
Uh, that's a tough one. There'll be a few, right? But I don't think it's going to be the norm. And it's probably not going to be the norm for several Super Bowls here. I think the ones that we see that'll be made out of Gen AI, you'll know it because they'll tell you, and that will be the point.
Yeah.
So, look, it's interesting because I think that it's a very powerful tool, and we're all still figuring out what we're going to do with it, right? It feels like lightning in a bottle, and it feels like it should turbocharge innovation. But the weird thing about innovation is I have no idea what it's going to do in 2 years because it hasn't been invented yet, right? I'd say this though, one of the things that AI has had an effect on, certainly in my group, in my business, is when we think about data strategy moving forward, like granularity is now moved up the priority stack because all of a sudden these giant data sets can be reviewed a lot faster. So having more is better. Like more is better again.
More is better. Mine, I don't know if anybody else has any guesses, but I'll throw out there that there's going to be two Gen AI Super Bowl spots per hour in the Super Bowl coming up. I don't know why, but that number just feels like for exactly the kind of reason that you threw out there too, Travis, which is like this year, the point will be that it was made by Gen AI and aren't I creative to a certain extent. Like there'll be
I
that
think
sort
that's
of
a super
underlying
interesting
vibe.
point is sort of this disclosure that, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, this was made with all AI. But again, I think to Travis's example, or maybe it was John's, you still need a filmmaker, you need a
Yeah.
producer who understands how to do those things. And it's not just like, oh, push the button and you're going to have a Super Bowl ad. That's unrealistic.
I mean, Super Bowl ads are a great example too of the last thing that we're going to see this in, right?
Yeah.
Because
Too high stakes.
the local car dealer can't afford to build stunning creative through an agent. So they're going to use this. If you're buying a Super Bowl spot, like the production cost is probably not your main driver.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering too if this year in Cannes we're going to see a spot win an award that was partially or all Gen AI made. I think those days
There's
are
a
not too
different
far ahead.
category
Yeah.
for that, right? Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
But the better question is how long until you're at Cannes and somebody wins an award and then it gets taken away later because people found out it was made with Gen AI.
Exactly.
A fraud. All right, let's go to the next question let's go to Sam Chester. What AI capabilities do you aim to deliver within your products in the current foundational models, that the current foundational models do not enable, but you expect will be able to deliver within the next 9 to 15 months?
Yeah, for us, this one's very straightforward. Given our focus on the business and media operations slash ad operations, we're most excited about a building our own sort of natural language processing unit, basically to enable you to make any kind of change in any one or more ad platforms. Context here is a little important. Most of our big media company clients use 3, 4, 5, sometimes more different ad platforms to run their business. I might have something for, an audio ad server, this thing for video, or this thing for managing programmatic, this thing for managing direct. Lots of different platforms are good at very specific kinds of things, but nothing exists to be able to like orchestrate among them and to be able to use natural language as an an ad operator or yield management or a campaign optimizer kind of person to just say, hey, it's lower all my price floors by 5% from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. For this part of my inventory, and to have the system be able to just orchestrate that across multiple ad platforms. You can almost think about it as like speak to your ad server. Of course, the prompt needs to be kind of appropriate, but that's the direction that we're heading. We're very, very excited about. Same thing. I want to make changes, bulk changes to thousands of line items. It could be labeling, it could be frequency caps. We don't really care so long as that ad server has the capability to do that in the way that we need it to, which is largely using kind of existing APIs to be able to create sort of that natural language interface to one or more operators at a media company to orchestrate across systems, for us is 100% the thing we're most excited about.
All right, this last question I'm going to give to Marcus Pratt, but before I do, just a reminder and thank everybody for joining us today. This session will be posted by the Upwave team on YouTube and various video distribution sources. So if you have other folks that couldn't make it or that you want to send it to, please by all means do that. And certainly hit all of us up on LinkedIn after the call. We'd love to connect with you directly. So I'm going to paraphrase Marcus's question, but it's basically kind of shifting gears. We've been talking obviously very B2B centric sort of within our own space, but shifting this to sort of the consumer end, what do you think is going to happen there? So what Marcus is basically saying is he's seeing a ton of answer engines for specific use cases, like help me with my homework, medical questions. Is that basically going to be the use case we think for consumer level and sort of the general public? Or do we think something fundamentally different is going to be coming out?
I can jump in. Like I do think that we'll start to see in the consumer space more and more of these specialized things, right? It'll be how folks want to differentiate themselves. And I think a big reason for that is that's already how we generally operate, right? In the existing internet consumer framework. To give a good example, right? Like I drive an old car, breaks a lot. It's old, right? If I need to find a part for it, I don't just go to Google and ask like, hey, the entire internet, where's this weird old part? It's like I have to go to a specialty website to search for it because that's the place that specializes in those kinds of things. Imagine that with an AI layer, and now you're just talking about generic versus specialized LLMs.
100%.
I think the declining costs of AI models is going to really lead to more permeation into consumer products. I think it's one of the big limiting factors now is if you're making $10 per user per year, it's pretty easy to spend that entire per user revenue on AI inference if you're not careful. But if the cost curve has been dropping by like 90% every year, and if it keeps dropping like that, you'll see more and more ubiquity of these things and have them be able to switch more from being reactive and sort of someone has to press a button or ask a question to proactive, where the app is monitoring your data every day and sending you notifications actively that are really thoughtful and tailored to your circumstance.
Awesome. Well, I think I'll close it out for us. I think the one consumer application that'll sneak up quicker than I think we realize are some of the more agentic-esque type things. I think today, using sort of Travis's use case on his car there, where he is actively searching for a part and it's giving him answers and things like that. I think that's very quickly going to be, hey, I need to fix this thing on my car on Saturday. Make sure I have all the stuff. And just the stuff is going to show up on Friday afternoon on his doorstep, and there you have it. And the part of me that makes me think that is the reality that's going to come soon really quick is how elegantly and frictionlessly the entire sort of consumer internet just adopted AI overviews in their search results without even noticing. Like just boop, it just happened.
Yeah.
And nobody said a word except for all of us sort of searching it, freaking out in search and paid media and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, thank you all for joining us today.